good afternoon, or good morning, everybody, depending on where you're at. We're going to go ahead and get started here with this 15-minute Friday. We're going to be talking about smart client profiles, what they are exactly, when you can use them, and what exactly you can achieve by using them. First, we're going to introduce ourselves real quick. My name is Justin Hawes. I'm a solutions engineer on the pre-sales team for Milestone based in central Pennsylvania. And I'll be taking you through some of the features and options that exist for the smart client profiles, and then discuss a few key parameters.
Everyone, good afternoon. I am Harry Irvin. I am actually based out of central New Jersey, also part of the pre-sales team, and I will be walking you through understanding smart client profiles, some use cases, some roles, tips, tricks, and we'll do a little bit of a live demo towards the end. So, understanding smart client profiles. What are smart client profiles? In order to differentiate users, what you can do is actually create unique smart client profiles. You can assign priorities to those so that there's a hierarchy of who sees what, and you can customize those profiles to fit different tasks. What smart client profiles do is they allow admins to control how the smart client should look and what features users have access to. You can set up rights for the panes and options, minimize and maximize options, inactivity time, whether or not you can remember passwords, print reports, exports, and things like that. It also allows for customization of the smart client so that you can present the client with a very tailored experience. As far as use cases go, really what we're looking at is when you have opportunities to define the roles and the access that people have to the smart client, you're looking at usually a lower or a higher level of profile. So in K through 12, you're talking about office administrators versus your IT professionals. In monitoring stations, police stations, and things like that, you have operators and guards versus investigators versus the admins that have control of the entire system. There's shift supervisors and guards also in those kinds of scenarios. And one of the nice things we can do with our advanced tab is actually look at some of the troubleshooting that you can do as far as performance goes on the smart client. There's three main things that affect how these profiles are set up. The first one is the roles tab. What these are the global security settings for users. And in these settings is where you're going to be able to turn on or off features that are particular to the recording server, things like smart search or access control or even the view groups. We have time profiles also. So on top of the roles, what you can do is you can define when a person has access to the smart client via time of day or operating hours or shift hours or things like that. And then ultimately you have your smart client profile. And this is where the user rights within the program are configured and controlled. So you have the functions as a smart client, things like video exporting, minimizing or maximizing the window, exiting the program, or even our bookmarking feature. What we'll do now is we'll have Justin actually go through some of these properties and talk about them.
Yep. So on the info tab, the first tab on profile properties, you get to see which roles are actually using this specific smart client profile. In this case, this role is just being used by the administrator's role. It is important to note that you could have multiple roles associated to a smart client profile. And I can't advance the slides, Harry, so do you mind?
I was clicking, it wasn't going.
I gotcha. Thank you, sir. So on the next tab, the general tab, this is basically a lot of stuff. So some of this stuff you can get lost in the weeds. We're going to go over a couple of different key features, starting with the top one, the default smart client mode. By default, that is set to advanced. It is a quick, easy change to set it to simplified. And what that does is it's basically going to give you a subset of the smart client that is very simple. If you've got users that aren't very PC, computer centric or PC savvy, this is a good option for them to make it less intimidating. It basically takes away some of the options and settings, and it just makes it look a little simpler by default, I suppose, or by definition, I suppose. On the right-hand side, we've got a checkbox where you can lock the setting. So what we're changing here in this properties window is basically going to be what is applied to that user's profile when they log in, but we're not restricting them to that unless we check this box. If we check this box, they will be locked to that setting and not be able to change it. Similarly, the next options we're going to go over are minimize, maximize, logout, and exit buttons. Important, but if you remove all of them, basically the user has no way to get out of the system. Sometimes that's the case, that's the point. But just be careful when you're restricting these and taking these away, knowing that you may have no way to log out of the system, things like that. Another key element here is the inactivity timeout. This will automatically log that user or group of users that are using that profile out of the system after so many minutes. This is good for security. So if you're not already using an Active Directory timeout on your machine, this can be applied at the smart client level. And it also will help you on your bandwidth. So once we time out, obviously we're not pulling those camera feeds, and then we're not consuming bandwidth on the network unnecessarily. Down at the bottom, we can also remove complete tabs. So System Monitor tab, Sequence Explorer tab, Alarm Manager tab. We can just make all of those go away or lock them. It's basically the sky's the limit. The next tab we're going to talk about is the Advanced tab. And this is a lot of troubleshooting stuff. For me, the one that I use the most on here is the Video Diagnostic Overlay. By default, it's hidden. It is turned off, and we recommend in production environments leaving it turned off. But if you're wanting to see what resolution or frame rate your cameras are running, you can set that to level 2, and it'll give you a lot of good information. Also, which hardware acceleration, if any, is being used will be displayed on that as well. These are the settings for the Live tab. The top one, obviously, whether or not it's available is the most important, but you can kind of see here the amount of scope that you have. And one thing I'd like to note here is the bookmark function. Most people know that when you're in live mode and you hit bookmark, it gives you an instant bookmark. And when you're in playback, it gives you the pop-ups that allows you to put in some notes. Those are just the defaults. And if you wanted to make them both quick, you could, or you could make them both pop up and prompt you for notes as well. So similar. It's just based on the playback tab. Again, maybe if you had a user that you only wanted to have live, not playback, you could totally remove that playback tab and lock it. For setup, this is where we can get in and, for example, if we really want to lock them down, we can set the parameters that they are receiving through the Smart Client profile, and then make it to where they cannot even go into setup mode to change any of the layouts or properties, anything like that. And then on the export tab, one of the key things here is simplification. So, Milestone, we have 7,000 cameras and that we support, and all this stuff. There's tons of features, tons of products, tons of stuff, but sometimes less is more. So in this case, with the export tab, what we can do is simplify it by eliminating all of the extra options. So still images is a great case here. Nobody does that anymore. So basically you could set the availability to not available. It won't even show up as an option for them. If your environment or your organization requires that every export be in Milestone XProtect format with 128-bit encryption and be pushed to a network drive, for example, you can actually set all of that right here and lock it. So that way, when the user goes to do an export, they don't receive a whole lot of options. Basically, they hit next, and it's a simple export within, I want to say it's like 2 or 3 mouse clicks. So simple and easy to use is key. And then these are the options we can set on the timeline, whether we want to show audio, bookmarks, things of that nature. And then for the access control tab, this is basically whether or not access requests notifications will be sent to that Smart Client profile. And likewise, smart maps. So if your organization used, say, Google and Bing, you could actually have a smart client profile associated to each. So that way, when they log into their smart client, they're going to receive the smart maps that pertain to that particular group within your organization. And view layouts, I think this is an important one as well. Again, going back to, Milestone has lots of options and can do so much. We can support up to 100 camera view. So basically 100 cameras per monitor, but not very many PCs can actually handle that with, especially with 4K cameras or 5 megapixel cameras at high resolution, high frame rate. So if you're using, maybe you have some end users that have limited performance PCs and things like that, they're good enough to use, but they're definitely not good enough to support 100 cameras. What we could do is create a smart client profile for those individuals and restrict, so basically uncheck these higher views. So basically anything above, say, 9 cameras or something like that, we could just uncheck it to where it's not an option. They can still create their own views and layouts using the cameras they have access to, but they can't create a view that's going to crash their system. And then Harry, you're going to take tips and tricks, right?
So tips and tricks. So what you're looking at here is some of the good bullet points as far as how to simplify setting some of this stuff up and some of the good things to remember. One of the important ones here is because you just saw how many options we have in configuring smart client profiles. You can right click any profile you've already created and copy it to create a new one. So you can create a base template and work from that template as far as making new profiles. As Justin mentioned, make sure when you're doing something, you leave an option for either exiting or logging out of the smart client. If you don't do that and it's forced to stay open, you have to Control-Alt-Delete and end the task in order to go back to a basic. Now, some, like as Justin said, some of these do stay up and open all the time. Keyboard shortcuts. So with that setup button, so you can get in and create all your settings and do your views. We also have a settings icon, and in that settings icon, you can control keyboard shortcuts. So refreshing the server configuration is Control R is one we like to set up often. Any of those keyboard shortcuts you create before you get rid of your setup and settings buttons still remain. So that's a good workaround. And to understand that this is unlimited if you have a corporate license for Xprotect Corporate, and you get 3 smart client profiles for Xprotect Expert and Professional Plus. With that, what we're going to do is get into a little bit of show and tell. I will bring up my management client real quick, and what you guys can see, I've got my roles and my users and everything like that, but under smart client profiles, I have 3 right now configured. I've got a test profile for security, a test profile for staff, and then my default smart client profile, which I have set to, as you guys can see right here on the right-hand side, administrators. So as I log in and out of each one of these profiles, so my username is an admin. So I will just log in real quick and you guys can see how populated this is. I've got live, I've got playback, I've got Sequence Explorer, all my tabs are up at the top. I can get in here and actually get into my settings menu where I can configure my keyboard, and I've got F5 for a server configuration. I have all my views as well as shared views. But as I log out of this one, and I'm going to log into security now, I gave security a more elevated capability than staff. So when this pops up, what you'll see is I've cleaned a lot of this up. So now, from an investigation standpoint, I have live, playback, and Sequence Explorer, but I've removed the rest of my tabs. I don't need all the shared views because what security should be looking at is just the things that are relative to them. And I've started to get rid of some of my settings. So I don't have my setup button and I don't have my settings tab up here. You can also see that now that this is open, I cannot exit out of this program. I can only log out. And now from security, I'll go to staff, and this will be one of the most stripped down. And the nice thing you can see here is from an administrative standpoint, somebody that's just observing cameras, I just have live I have my fields of view open. I don't have my setup. They cannot close or minimize the program. So once it's up and running. But one of the nice things that you can do is I kept the bookmark feature here. So as a viewer, as an observer, I can still bookmark so that later on I can just send an email, hey, security, can you check this out? I bookmarked it in the software, and they can go back and do a smart search based on that, and then start their investigation from the live and playback. I will log out of that. And with that, we are at 16 minutes. I do not see any questions. If there's any questions, please send them in. Otherwise, I think that's a wrap. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, I think we covered everything that I had on my checklist anyway. Well, actually, now that I've said that, there is an e-learning course that covers this. It's called Using the XProtect VMS Deployment Best Practice Guide. And it has links to the guide version, and apparently there's a checklist version of this as well, so that you can actually step through it and check things off as you go through it.
That's good for setup.
All right.
Thanks for joining, guys.
Thank you.